25, and this is a public meeting of the School Board of West Bend Joint School District Number 1. More than 24 hours prior to the meeting, notice of the time, place, date, and subject matter of this meeting was posted at the entrance doors of the Education Service Center and on the district website. It was also sent to the West Bend Community Memorial Library, the Daily News, WRYU, Milwaukee Journal Sentinel, and other media sources that have requested notice of our meetings. I'll pause to ask Superintendent Wimmer to confirm that this meeting was properly posted.
Yes, it was.
Great. Please rise and join me in reciting the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. We recognize a quorum of our board with all 7 members present. With that, next item on our agenda is approval of the agenda, which was published in advance. I move to approve this agenda. Is there a second? Thank you, Mr. Donaldson. Motion and second to approve our agenda. Any final discussion? All in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Thank you. That motion carries. We move to public participation. I was not provided any public participation cards, and I don't see any in our audience, so we'll move on then to the consent agenda. On our consent agenda tonight, we have minutes of the February 3rd, 2025 regular board meeting and executive session, no contracts to approve, 1 resignation, 3 retirements. We have a bond underwriter agreement, a financial advisor agreement, agreement modification with Epstein Ewan Architects to outline phases for 4 projects, as well as early college credit program course requests. I believe that's everything on the consent agenda. I will pause to ask, are there questions on any of the items on the consent agenda? Hearing none then, I would move to approve this consent agenda. Is there a second? Thank you, Dr. Temez. Motion and second to approve the consent agenda. Any final discussion? Hearing none, all in favor, please say aye. Any opposed? Thank you. That motion carries. We move then to a number of reports. We're going to start with a compensation update, and Mr. Lenny Hansen, our Assistant Superintendent, will give us the compensation update. Good evening.
Good evening. Brief update again. We've continued to have ongoing negotiations with the WBEA around compensation for 2024-2025. Continue to have good conversation. We'll be meeting again this week, hoping to reach a conclusion to that process very soon. And then, as we've done in the past, all compensation adjustments for all employee groups generally come all in the same board meeting. So hopefully we're nearing that point in the process, and we'll continue to keep the board updated.
Great. Thank you. Any questions for Mr. Hansen? All right. We appreciate your update.
Thank you.
We move next to winter assessment results and foreshadowing spring assessments. And Tina Van Roo, our Student Assessment Data Coordinator, is going to walk us through this item. Good evening to you.
All right, hello. All right, thank you for having me. The results that we're going to be going through tonight are all aligned to the screening that we do for our students in grades K through 8, and as well as a refresher of what we do with our 9th and 10th grade students. As previewed this summer, we notified you that our literacy assessments were going to look a little bit different this year due to the new assessment that's coming into play from Act 20 for early literacy, our youngest elementary students. So I'd like to take you through each lane of the assessments that we're offering this year. And then as I go through the presentation, any assessments that were new, you'll be given an overview of them before we get into the results of them. So in the first row, for literacy, we have given STAR as our reading screener for the past 7 years. To continue with this practice, we administered it in fall and in early winter. So we had September and December testing. This allowed each of the K-8 grade levels to be able to show growth and change from one assessment window to the other. Then the second row for literacy is where the new AIMSweb Plus early literacy screener came into play. It was not ready in the fall to be administered, so the first required administration was in winter. So we gave it in winter in January to our students in grades K through 3, and then we intend to give it in spring again, and in spring it will be grades 4K through 3. And then you can see under the 4th through 8th grade column, they will continue taking the STAR reading, which has, again, been our universal screener for 7 years. In the row for math, we have been giving STAR math for 7 years, and it applies to grades 1 through 8. We had a hole in our assessment system, so to plug that hole this year, we are doing a pilot screener called USNS, and we will evaluate the results and then make a decision on what screener we will use for the years going forward. We'll start with USNS, which stands for the Universal Screener for Number Sense. Again, we had a hole in our assessment system, hence the pilot that we're doing for this year. This screener was available to us at no cost. It is administered to our kindergarten students by our math interventionists, and we're giving it 3 times a year. So there is no extra work on the classroom teachers to give the assessment. They just get to get and use the data that comes from it. The kindergarten students are assessed in this assessment through tasks, and the tasks come in 3 different areas, including numbers, addition, subtraction, and place value. And then there's a little chart or table on here that shows which of those tasks are assessed in each window. So the numerals, addition, and subtraction are given all 3 windows, fall, winter, and spring. And then place value will be introduced during the spring assessment. Each screener comes with a set of benchmarks that's unique to that program or software. For USNS, they use the overall score of the assessment to place the kids in one of 4 levels. They use well below, below, and basic, and then proficient as the definitions for those levels. So the results that I'll be sharing with you is how many kiddos met the proficient expectation this winter. So 66% of our kiddos reached that level 4 of being proficient, and that is an 11% increase from when they first took the assessment in fall. So they showed really nice growth. At the bottom of this slide, you'll see that there's a note referencing DPI's multi-level systems of support framework. When we look to measure how we're doing universally across a grade level, there is a target that we hope to hit that 80% of our kiddos are meeting expectations. So that applies on the behavioral side as well as the academic. So while 80% is the target, we have 66% meeting right now, and we are on track to continue growing that number when we reassess the students in spring. Next up is our STAR assessments. We'll go right into results for this since we've been using STAR for so many years. I'll just give you a reminder on how the benchmarking works. STAR produces a score that's called a national percentile rank, and we use that rank to place the kiddos in one of 4 proficiency levels. Once students reach a level 3 or above, they are considered to be proficient. The cut score that places them at a level 3 is the 50th percentile rank. For many years, we've been using the 50th percentile rank for STAR. In years past, we were using a higher cut score for math, but if you recall, the Wisconsin Forward exam got a makeover last year, so that 50 and 70 crosswalk that used to exist was now gone. So this is the first year that we're using the 50th percentile for both STAR reading and STAR math. So we have one unified cut no matter what assessment they take at what grade level. Also, with the Wisconsin Forward exam last year, we only have 1 year of data, but students in grades 3 through 8, they approximately had to earn a percentile rank of 48 or 49 to be considered proficient. So the fact that we have been using and will continue to use the 50th does provide STAR as a good predictive measure of how Wisconsin Forward will go for our students. So here are the results grouped together by assessments, just a blanket celebration. It's the highest performance we've had since we've been giving STAR in 7 years. For early literacy, which is taken for our K-1 students, 74% were at or above that proficiency benchmark. For reading, which is given in grades 2 through 8, 67% hit the benchmark. And in STAR Math, which is grades 1 through 8, 70% were at or above that benchmark. Each grade level does tell a different story, so we did provide a chart that shows 2 colorful bars per grade level. So if you look at kindergarten, you'll see in orange how many kids in fall met the benchmark, compared to blue how many met in winter. And each grade level has their own results available. Just a huge celebration for kindergarten. They are our first class ever to hit that 80%. It's just super exciting. It was great to be in the buildings in January giving a different assessment and being able to tell the teachers, you guys, you're doing it, it's working. It was just a wonderful celebration. So I'm very excited to be able to share that work that they're doing on behalf of them with you. Bigger picture, whether you look at kindergarten all the way up through 8th grade, you will see that there is growth or change from fall to winter in every single grade level. Here's a similar chart, but this is capturing our STAR Math results. Again, we have that target line going across that would represent that 80% that we're hoping to meet. We have a bunch of grades that are really close to hitting that, specifically our 1st graders, 4th graders, 6th graders, and 7th graders all have 70-some%, which means that gap to hit the 80 is very, very close, which means it's very, very doable. So lots of celebrations within our STAR Math data as well. Okay. Do you have a question? Yes.
I do have a question.
Yeah.
So we look at fall, we look at winter, and I'm just curious because I imagine a student entering the fall semester, and they haven't had a lot of time with the curriculum because it's fall.
Yep.
And then, of course, then there's spring, and they've had more time. How does the tool account for that? Should we as a board be expecting that we would see 80% right away, or are we expecting to see 80% at the end of the year after the full curriculum has been into play? Just looking as to how the board should be interpreting this, because that 80% mark that was hit is fantastic. I'm just curious, what should we be looking at, if anything, between fall or winter or spring?
Yeah.
If you can help me with that.
No, that's a great question. Since we use that percentile rank to hit that benchmark, are they meeting it or not, that crosswalks to the test's actual score. And the score is normed for each window. So if we're hitting that 50th percentile all year, a score in the fall might be 100, winter might be 110, spring might be 120. So while that score grows every window, that 50th percentile mark moves with it. So we could expect that in the beginning of the year, when they haven't received a lot of instruction, that expectation of a lower score is normed to reflect that. And then as they get instruction, we expect that score to go up a little, and they get more instruction, and we expect it to go up a lot. So in theory, you could want 80% at every window, but our big checkpoint is going to be that end of year spring testing, and that's when we look to have the most kids closest to proficiency and reaching mastery.
Sure, so that makes sense. So what I'm hearing is the test kind of gets tougher, if you will, or it's more comprehensive because we would expect the students have received more learning or more teaching.
Yeah.
Okay.
I
Thank you.
think a great representation of that question is if you look at 1st grade as displayed here. When our kindergarteners took this STAR Math when our 1st graders took STAR Math for the first time in fall, 46% of them met the benchmark. And that's 2 weeks into school, first time taking a test. So it's realistic that they hadn't experienced what they needed yet. They got tons of instruction, and come December, it went up more than almost 30 percentage points, and now 73 are meeting. So it does norm enough so that we can see growth window to window.
Thank you.
I also think it's important to point out that we're talking about percentiles, not percent correct. So
Yes.
it's not that 73% of kids couldn't get half the questions right. It's that 73% of kids achieved the median score.
Yes, the medium ranking.
Just looking at 8th grade, do you think that drop is due to being introduced to new challenging concepts in math? I mean, I've seen it before, just that if kids get to a point where, they're not understanding, even by a little bit, the more, goes on top of whatever they're not learning, they just get further and further behind.
Yeah.
So is that what we're kind of seeing with that, is kids are struggling with something and then they just don't get all the way through, and, when they go to take the test, they're lacking in some of those skills?
I think it's kind of twofold. So knowing what this group of 8th graders' data was like last year in 7th grade, this data is actually improved. So if we look at that cohort as they went from 7th to 8th, there was growth. From fall to winter, having that 1% change, that wouldn't statistically define anything. It could be some more kids tested that weren't with us in fall. Some kids didn't test in winter. So it wouldn't be, that 1 point change wouldn't be a concerning factor. To your point though, sometimes kids get stuck on certain skills that do prevent them from hitting that grade mark. When that happens and we get screening data like this, they fall into that DPI MLSS process, and we look to see if we can serve them in intervention and if we can fill that skill gap so that they can proceed and kind of close that grade level expectation. I can't say specifically what's happening with this group of 8th graders in the winter, but I can tell you that their 8th grade data is higher than 7th grade, so there is longitudinal growth to celebrate with this group.
Just following up on that question, we can certainly see these results in the aggregate, which is very powerful. Are teachers then able to see individual student assessment to say student A is struggling with long division and student B really doesn't get algebra or whatever it may be and needs additional assistance?
Yes. After the screening test is completed, the teachers get results right away. So they can access class and individual results right in STAR. STAR assesses all of the different standards-based domains. So if they are struggling in the area of algebra readiness, it would kick out some scores and details that define algebra readiness. And if they need to, they can use that, look at their curriculum, and provide extra support. If a kiddo scores low enough on the assessment where they might be more at risk, that's where we would then be looking through the lens of supporting them via an intervention. So all staff get the results right away, and they use it in different ways depending on their job and how they can support. Superintendent Wimmer, do you think I covered that okay?
Yeah, I think also, I'm sure we'll hear from Melanie a little bit further. One thing that we've been looking at and monitoring is math. We are undergoing a process to look at our curriculum and our resource to see how we can accelerate growth. So we'll speak to that and where we are in the process a little bit further. But that's certainly something the curriculum committee as well as some teams have been looking at for the organization as a whole as well, not just the one cohort.
Yeah. Other questions related to STAR? All right. Next up is the new early literacy screener that was put in place via Act 20, and it's titled AIMSweb Plus. I'm going to give you a brief overview just to kind of set the stage of what it is and what we assess, and then we'll get into results. So per Act 20, DPI was tasked to select a reading readiness screener, and they made that selection of AIMSweb Plus this past July. They needed time to get the system ready and to produce trainings, so that's why we were not required to administer it this fall. The first required administration was this winter for kindergarten through grade 3, and then our 4Kers will be taking it just in the spring window. We actually had the teacher training for 4K this morning in this very room. AIMSweb Plus is nationally normed, just like STAR. However, if STAR is a standards-based comprehensive assessment system, AIMSweb Plus just looks at the skills. So can they do their phonics? Can they decode when they're reading? So it's looking at all the different skills that require kids to become proficient readers. I'll go through a snip of each grade level's assessments. So this is 4K. On the far left column, you'll see the Act 20 fundamental skill that has to be assessed. So for 4K, they have to do phonemic awareness and letter sound knowledge. In the middle columns, you'll see what assessment is given via Ames Web Plus and during what window. So upcoming this spring, the students will be assessed on their initial sounds and then their letter word sound fluency. These tests are administered one-on-one, and as the kiddos get stimulus packets to look at, letters to see, pictures to touch and identify, the teacher will be on the computer entering if things are correct or incorrect, and then as soon as the test is done in 1 to 3 minutes, it automates the score for the staff right away. The text that's in red, the initial sounds and the letter word sound fluency, are both deemed at-risk qualifiers. Throughout Act 20's law, if a student falls below the 25th percentile, so they fall in that bottom quartile of performance, they're deemed at risk. In 4K, all that does is notify us. There aren't any required steps that we do if a kiddo is at risk. However, once we move on to kindergarten and above, any student that is at risk is required some additional steps to ensure that we're helping fill those reading skill gaps. Here is kindergarten. You can see that the Act 20 fundamental skills more than double when they get to kindergarten. They will continue taking initial sounds and letter word sound fluency just like they did in 4K. But now additionally, they'll be taking letter naming fluency and auditory vocabulary. Again, each of these assessments is given one-on-one, and the teacher scores the correctness or incorrectness on the website as soon as the student is done assessing. The two areas in red are letter naming fluency and letter word sound fluency. Together for this grade, that creates a composite or an overall score, and that overall score is what's used to deem if a student is at risk, if they're below that 25th percentile. Starting at this grade, if a student is deemed at risk, they will fall into some required diagnostics. And then, if needed, they would be having a personal reading plan created for them, which could be served via intervention to help fill the skill that's preventing them from demonstrating proficiency. I look at Dr. Temez, so I'm going to try an analogy here, and please correct me. But just like screening, you go to your annual health checkup, and you just want to make sure everything's right. And if something flags, like something flags here in red, you might do extra tests to see what's going on, and then you make a plan. So just like a medical analogy, that's kind of how screening, at-risk, and diagnostics fall into play for academic assessments. How'd I do on that? Is that okay? Okay, nod of approval, thank you. For first grade, the fundamental skills change a little bit. Next fall, for the first time, they'll take 2 assessments based on phoneme segmentation and letter word sound fluency. But then all year long, they're going to take an oral reading fluency, and they'll continue with auditory vocabulary. This is where things really change from what we previously knew from other assessments. The oral reading fluency, or the ORF, is the only test out of the 4 that's going to trigger if a kiddo is at risk. And an oral reading fluency is basically saying how fast and accurately can you read within 1 minute. So students are given 2 passages, so they have 2 opportunities to show how fast and accurate they can read. Oral reading fluency is a predictor of reading comprehension, which would come into play come 3rd grade and beyond. So that's why it holds so much weight under the law. 2nd and 3rd grade are combined into one table. The oral reading fluency continues. It continues to be the at-risk indicator. But then for oral vocabulary, the students actually will log on to a testing platform, a software, and they will take it on their computer just like they take STAR on the computer. So these two grades experienced a mixed mode where they have one-on-one with the ORF and computer with the vocab. AimsWeb Plus is nationally normed, and like STAR, it does use percentile ranks to define proficiency levels. We have traditionally been used to having 4 proficiency levels, but Ames has 5. They use a scale of average to define the 5 different levels. And once a kiddo reaches average, which is the 25th percentile, they are considered good in their skills, where they are likely to be successful as a future reader. So the 25th percentile is quite different than all of our other benchmarking, which is at the 50th percentile, but each assessment system is unique. The results on this page are going to be sharing are all of the kids who met that average expectation in the at-risk areas. So kindergarten, again, produced that composite score, which were the 2 assessments merged into one. 66.1% of our kiddos were at or above the average expectation. For grades 1, 2, and 3, we're sharing the ORF, that oral reading fluency, and it ranges from 65 up to 71% of our kids meeting the average or above expectation. Before I move on to what's coming up this spring, do you have any questions about AimsWeb Plus, the new screener? It's a lot, so, okay. All right. We have state assessment season coming up. And while we're forecasting spring, I do want to share one state assessment that we just finished up this winter. Throughout December and January, we administer the Access for ELLs to any EL English language student in grades K through 12. They're assessed in 4 different areas: listening, speaking, reading, and writing. And as soon as the end of April, we'll be receiving their scores, and that will help us determine how much their English language proficiency has grown. This is the only test that can exit them from their services. So if they reach a certain score and also have classroom proof of success, they can exit direct services and just be monitored to make sure that their English proficiency isn't hindering their education. So yeah, we had just over 130 kids participate, and our EL staff did a fantastic job managing the schedules to get it all done. So great work from them. Next up, March 18th, is the ACT with writing. Our juniors in grade 11 will be participating in that test online. It assesses English, reading, math, science, and writing. The students get to create a My ACT profile that they get to tie to their own personal email account, and they can get their results from that assessment within 5 to 8 weeks after taking the test. And then we receive all of the district results in June. There's a big window from March 17th to April 25th where the Wisconsin Forward exam will take place. So while it's a big window, we only have about 5 weeks to get it done since spring break falls in there. Students in grades 3 through 8 and 10, depending on their grade level, take a mixture of different assessments covering the areas of ELA, math, science, and social studies. DPI has kind of mentioned that they might be using AI scoring to help with the writing portions of that test. So tentatively, we should be getting those results in late May versus in the past, we get them at the end of June or middle of July. So if all of that falls into place, we should have those results sooner than later. On April 10th, our 9th and 10th graders will be participating in Pre-ACT Secure. They'll be assessed in English, reading, math, and science. And lastly, we have that big window yet again for dynamic learning maps. Select students in grades 3 through 11 participate in this in ELA, Math, Science, and Social Studies. It is the alternate exam that replaces all the exams above. So it's our students that have the most significant learning needs or cognitive abilities, and they take basically a personalized test that is measured and gauged to what they can do on their essential elements, on their alternate educational standards. I want to highlight just a couple things from some of these tests. As mentioned in our screening table that we started this off with, we brought pre-ACT in as a fall screener last year. We did this to complete the ACT suite of assessments. So in September, our 9th and 10th graders took pre-ACT. Now this spring, when they take pre-ACT Secure, we can actually view the two tests kind of like a pre-test and a post-test, allowing us to show how much the students have grown from fall to spring in this suite of assessments. If you recall, we don't do any screening for 11th and 12th graders, but to prepare for the ACT, which comes up in March, we offer a lot of prep opportunities to help the students prepare. So West Bend does their own ACT prep. The high school purchases a software where they have access to like test questions, mini assessments, and there's actually a full practice ACT embedded in it. They had a junior class assembly at the end of January where they launched this test prep plan. And there are strategic Mondays that are leading up to test day that are going to be they'll be using their resource or homeroom period to start the day to walk through that software so they can pick their own adventure and practice the content areas of the test that they feel they need the most practice on. The classroom teachers have also developed test-taking tips, and those test-taking tips for those content areas are going to be embedded in those lessons as well to help kind of calm any nerves that may come and provide strategies to help them be successful on test day. Our math department at the high school goes one step more, and they actually host a math prep, test prep option just for their department. That was shared out in the high school's February newsletter, and it's open to students still to attend. And tomorrow, the high school sends out a Tuesday Touchpoint newsletter, and in there, the counseling department created a huge doc of all free ACT prep opportunities, some produced by the company and some provided by alternate companies that all students could access for free. The pre-ACT Secure and ACT all have a shared readiness goal. It's easy to think of ACT as a college entrance exam, and it's not that anymore. Their whole focus is on readiness, so all of the norming that they've done nationally, when you get your test score, can help with either path that you take post-high school. It will show you how those benchmarks help you be prepared for high school, then college, or high school, then career. So I just want to highlight that because I think a lot of us probably associate ACT with college only, and that's not the case anymore. Here is a snip of what our students take in Wisconsin Forward. As I had mentioned, they have a big window, but because of spring break, they only have a few weeks to get the testing done. And it's not like they sit down and take an ELA test and is done, or a math test and is done. Each content area comes with multiple sessions underneath that we have to schedule, assess, make up testing. So that 5-week window is fully utilized by all of our buildings. Different grade levels take different content assessments. So if you're an 8th grader, you are going to take all 3 ELA, all 3 math, all 3 science, and both social studies. However, if you're a 3rd grader, you're just going to take 3 ELA and 2 math. So each schedule per grade level is really unique, and our buildings work really hard to build test schedules that don't take away too much time from instruction and try to keep the days pretty normal and typical for the students so it's not disruptive. With our new Ames Web Plus screener, there is something I want to note in relation to Wisconsin Forward. Under Act 20 law, it requires Ames Web Plus screening in the spring to be all the way completed 45 calendar days prior to the end of the school year. The spring window also opens in their software on March 16th. So that creates a direct window overlap with Wisconsin Forward for grade 3. So we knew about this ahead of time, which is great. So there's lots of considerations being made at the elementary buildings to create a testing schedule for March and April that is going to provide some balance so that the kiddos aren't testing every single day and we have to stop instruction every day. So I don't have all of those done. We're working on them still, but I just wanted to put that out there because many parents are going to be receiving notifications of these tests coming up, and they're going to overlap, and it could raise concerns. So we're putting a lot of consideration into finding some balance between that large amount and large volume of assessments. As I had mentioned, we are going to be getting all those state assessment results as soon as the end of April for our access for ELLs, but by the end of June, we'll have everything in our hands. All of that data will be used for internal use, and throughout the summer, we conduct leadership meetings, which include principals, coordinators, and in August, we even bring in the building leadership teams, which are representative of different school staff, to go through all the results and create school improvement plans for each year going forward. Then in fall, which historically has been the middle of October, DPI announces the public release, and that's when I will compile a report for the school board so you can see how we performed and also how we performed compared to some of our comparable districts through the lens of demographics and spending and things like that. Do you have any questions about what's coming up this spring?
First, we appreciate your report. A lot of good information on a very important topic. Board members, any questions? Mr. Jenkins.
Yeah, and maybe it has more to do with the STAR testing back earlier, but coincidentally, I had a conversation with a parent yesterday who referred to the STAR testing, and I guess more of the question is, how should parents react to this score, right? Because in his example, he got the score sheet, and his daughter ranked a little bit lower, but when he looks at the actual grades that she gets, it was, higher, right? And so he kind of got a mixed message. He didn't know how to take this what the STAR rating score truly meant to him and his child's educational journey. So
Yeah.
can you explain that to me as if I made dresses? Like, what do I as a parent need to get out of that score when I get that?
Yeah, I think it's a really great question. I think the biggest message is one test isn't a complete picture of what a kiddo can or can't do. So if the results look amazing or they look concerning, it's just one snapshot, one measure. So the best thing to do is what he said, is he also looked at grades. Hopefully, he would go back to his teacher and ask for any kind of clarity on performance. But the more measures we have, the better, because that's going to give a more complete picture. We even do that when we look at our internal screening data compared to the state assessments. All of our screening data come with national norms, but our Wisconsin Forward exam just come with state norms. So you're not always looking at the different assessment systems through apples to apples. Every piece of info they get on that STAR report is something that the teachers can use to try to help them do what they need to do at grade level. We also understand not every kid is going to hit that grade level expectation all the time. So what we're really hoping for is that the next time they take the test, they're showing growth. We're just looking for that always improving, always learning a little bit more, and it doesn't have to be perfect proficient every time.
Other questions? I see none. Thank you so much for your report.
Thank you.
All right. Our next report then is our Curriculum Committee report, and Melanie Ergot, our committee chair, will give that report. Melanie.
All right, so the Curriculum Committee met on February 11th. We had a more full agenda than we usually have lately. But first, we reviewed the progress of the grades 6 through 12 math resource selection process. There's been a lot of analysis, and the review team has narrowed the options to 2 choices each for middle and high school. So the members of the review team will visit the schools using the resources, and vendors will be presenting at some upcoming professional development days. And the staff will have time to review the materials before a recommendation is brought back to committee for further review. And any recommended resource would include community review as well as board discussion and action. Next, we also discussed the grade 5 ELA resource review. With 5th grade transitioning back to the elementary buildings, the CKLA Amplify curriculum was already implemented in the grades K through 4. So they're looking into alignment with the 5th grade and bringing that also for that grade level. So there's a review team currently including teachers and specialists that will begin evaluating if that's going to be a good fit for that. We also reviewed quarter 4 book club selections for grades 5 and 6. There were 2 new books added for 5th grade, and there was a new selection of books presented for 6th. The families still continue to have the option of either unit by unit approval or just a blanket approval with their permission slips. And we just continue to have transparency and expanding options for students and families. I want to say that I noticed there was a lot more books with the NA across all 3 categories, and anything that did flag, we did hear excerpts from the books in the committee of what things would have flagged that. So if anybody wants to go back and rewatch that, it should be available. And then we also discussed a process for the 300 series policy review, and that covers instructional policies such as curriculum programs and field trips. Students will be actively engaged in this review, particularly on policies impacting graduation and coursework. The policies will be reviewed in small batches, and updates will be provided to both policy and the board as we continue on working on that. And that concludes my report.
Thank you. We appreciate the committee's work, and heard you talking about policy, and we've got a policy committee meeting, I think, next week. We'll talk about that later, so we appreciate that. Any questions for Melanie on the curriculum committee report? All right, hearing none, we'll move to the superintendent's report. Superintendent Wimmer.
Sure. Last week, the WBSD Way team hosted a thank you breakfast for community partners. So that's the framework of supports designed to maximize academic engagement and achievement for all of our students in conjunction with community partners and community organizations. So you might see that language out in businesses like Dunn Brothers, Eaton's, Pizza Ranch, all of those organizations. It was catered by our culinary students at East and West. The breakfast featured Badger students singing songs for their upcoming musical. So we'd just like to thank representatives of the businesses and organizations for attending, as well as their ongoing partnership. So I know at the breakfast, Boys and Girls Club, Casa Guadalupe, Dunn Brothers, Eaton's, Fresh Pizzas, Kettle Moraine YMCA, MOA, Pizza Ranch, Right Way Bus Company, We Rock the Spectrum, West Bend Creamery are just people who were in attendance. That's a larger slate. If people are interested in the community, if you have a business or an organization, reach out and we can help you get connected to learn a little bit more. Just foreshadowing for families, community members that our summer school registration is almost open. We have another year of robust summer school programming, and that registration will open in March. So it will be here before you know it. For our students in current grades 8 through 12, that will open March 10th, and current grades 4K through 7, that will follow on March 17th. All the registrations are completed using Skyward, so check out our website for more detail and maybe add that to your calendars around those upcoming dates. Speaking of dates, I would like to encourage everyone to consider nominating a deserving teacher or support staff member from the West Bend School District for the Rolf's Education Foundation Awards or the Support Employee of the Year Awards. That nomination deadline is March 21st. So community members, staff, students could all nominate an employee for an award to be recognized for their outstanding contributions. That nomination form is also located on our website. And then we have a few winter sports that are nearing an end. So I'd like to highlight some students. for the second year in a row, the West Bend High School Co-op Boys Swimming and Diving Team has won their conference championship. So they also did this while setting several conference and pool records at Port Washington High School as they competed. There were 4 individual conference champions and 2 relay teams. So very talented team continued its success with a number of qualifiers for the Division I state championship will take place this coming weekend at Waukesha South High School. Also mentioning Joel Walters, Gavin Peruk will go on to state in diving. Swimmers had their best times in every single event at their sectional meet. So there are 9 student athletes going to state to represent West Bend in 9 events, so 12 entries total. I'd just like to recognize those students for their work. So in relays, 200 medley relay, Drew Gundrum, Weston Keppert, Dawson Walters, and Wesley Alleith. 20 free relay, Colton Multerer, Ian Ressler, Jay Peruk, and Wesley Alleith. 400 free relay, a lot of repeat names. There's some seriously strong swimmers. Wesley Alleith, Weston Keppert, Drew Gundrum, Dawson Walters. And those individual qualifiers in the 200 free, Dawson Walters, 100 butterfly, Dawson Walters. The 200 individual medley, Weston Keppert, 100 free, Wesley Alleith and Drew Gundrum, and the 100 backstroke, Weston Keppert and Drew Gundrum. So you can see why that team has continued to nail their championship out of their conference. So good luck as they represent West Bend and compete at state this coming weekend. Also, our snowboarding teams and skiers are off to state at the WIARA state championships. The boys co-op snowboarding team took 3rd, and Gavin Schaubill was 2nd in slalom. So congratulations on their state championship performance. And just a reminder that February's Career Technical Education Month and the high school co-curriculars associated with these classes have regional competitions this month. So the West Bend Skills USA had a spectacular showing at their regional competition. In addition to sweeping the podium with 1st, 2nd, and 3rd place in photography, they also had state qualifiers in precision machining, CNC 3-axis milling, and screen printing. So congratulations to those students. And a total of 25 students represented our chapter in various competitive events at the Future Business Leaders of America regional competition. Among them, we had 15 students placed in the top 3 of their events, securing their qualifications for the State Leadership Conference this spring. The remaining 10 students also placed within the top 10 of their respective events. With 29 schools competing in the regional, our chapter achieved an impressive 4th place overall. So congratulations to all those competitors. And also, the Wisconsin Volleyball Coaches Association has awarded the West Bend West volleyball players all academic individual awards. To qualify, players must demonstrate active participation on the team, complete the fall semester with a 3.5 GPA or higher. We'd like to recognize 5 players that maintained a perfect 4.0 GPA: Maddie Abel, Kylie Altendorf, Ava Banks, Amelia Duby, Paige Guzzi, and Braylee Ustruck. So congratulations to all those students for representing their teams and West Bend in those competitions. That concludes my report.
Thank you. Any questions for Superintendent Wimmer? Appreciate it very much. We move to our single discussion item tonight. Excuse me, and that is bond issuance. And Mr. Hanson is back at the podium to walk us through this item. Good evening again.
Good evening. I'm going to give a preview briefly of what the bond issuance process does and looks like, which will be coming towards the board in the coming weeks. So first of all, why does the district issue bonds? So the process of issuing bonds is how the district obtains the resources that were approved by the voters through the November referendum. So the principal, basically, of the $106.25 million that's approved by that referendum is then secured through bonds that then the district repays over the course of up to a 20-year term, which is those terms are set by statute and things like that. So, those will pay for things that, you can typically assume, like the actual cost of materials for constructing buildings and doing renovations, but also other services such as architect fees and all those sorts of things that go into all of those projects. All of those different types of costs were included in the initial proposal that came forward as part of the referendum. So bonds is how the district acquires the dollars to pay all of those various contractors who will then do the work over the coming next few years. Today, during the consent agenda, the board approved two important contracts that help us on the way to securing those bonds. One is with the underwriter, which is Baird. That partner was selected previously, and then the final contract approved today. Baird, as the underwriter, has a duty of fair dealing, both to represent fairly the investors who will buy the bonds, but also the district who is selling the bonds. PMA is the other agreement that was approved today, that they serve as the district's financial advisor, and they have an even higher standard of obligation to the district, as they have a true fiduciary responsibility to the district, representing the district as we work with Baird and other partners towards the sale of bonds and the acquiring of those proceeds. So they really operate as our sole advocate in the process as well. So we'll be working primarily with those two partners as we go through this process. The process of issuing bonds, we actually currently are anticipating is probably going to be multiple issuances. And the reason for that is you want to time out how you issue those bonds so that you can maximize interest earnings for the district, which then it benefits the taxpayers. So by working with PMA, they look at the various construction schedules, when different projects will take place, when those payments have to be made, and then they help advise and work with us to develop a good schedule for when we will need those dollars available to ensure that we're maximizing interest returns for taxpayers through the projects. So the board's role in this, you might say, well, the voters already approved the referendum, just go ahead and do it. Well, the board has a very specific role in this process as we get to that finish line. What will happen is at some point in March at a board meeting, we'll bring forward a resolution to the board where the board will give its approval around a number of important parameters that the administration, in working with PMA and Baird, will stay within as it issues those bonds. So one of the parameters might be, that any bond may not have an interest rate that exceeds a certain amount. Or another parameter may be that the bonds would be purchased between a specific date range, and that they not exceed a certain total amount, for example, in that issuance. That's a pretty standard way that you go about getting that resolution of approval from the board, and then that creates those boundaries within which Baird and PMA operate in order to then secure the best possible deal for the district and its taxpayers in the issuance of those bonds. Once that final step is done and the actual sale takes place through Baird, the board president and the clerk then ultimately sign the final paperwork that comes out of that process. But that's only after this resolution is approved by the board first. In the lead up to that, we'll have a ratings call. Currently, the district's rating in its most recent rating call was a AA-. Certainly, there's things that work in our favor as we head towards that ratings call. Biggest thing for sure is that we're one of those few districts that had paid off its debt prior to looking at new referendum debt. That certainly helps us, but also the fact that we're about to engage in a new project factors in as well. So that'll take place in the coming weeks ahead of all this work. Really, the big time frame, like I said, in March, a resolution comes before the board. When the process really wraps up, everything's completed, we would anticipate that the district actually receives the proceeds from that bond sale sometime probably in early April. As Baird said when Brian Brewer from Baird came by in January, currently interest rates are more favorable than the initial very conservative estimates that we used last summer and fall ahead of the referendum, and that trend continues where interest rates are continuing to be favorable. So we continue to be in a good position, and Baird feels good about the timeline of where we are, as does PMA, about where we can anticipate rate trends in the coming month and a half while this process plays out. So that's a really quick, around the world of how this process will look. We'll continue to update the board ahead of when that resolution comes forward. So I'll answer any questions that anybody might have about that process.
Thank you for the update. You talked earlier about when we borrow the money, we may not need it immediately. There's an opportunity to invest it. And I think I heard that, would it be PMA who would give us advice on where do we put that?
PMA does advise on how to best take advantage of those dollars to maximize your interest, but also do it within certain statutorily required windows of time. And that's where you really line up. When is that construction schedule? When will you need the dollars? Because you also don't want to be accruing interest on payments back on that too early, right? If on some of these projects, are a couple years out. So you may not want to, it may not make sense to take out all of that money. If you think of it, it's not a loan, but you can kind of use similar types of, thought process as you're kind of, thinking this through. You wouldn't take it out too early because you've got to start making payments on it, right? And you're accruing interest early. So you want to time that out carefully. PMA advises on that, and then we look at all the various partners who are out there who can provide investment services to maximize those earnings.
Great. Thank you. Other questions? Certainly a lot more to come. We appreciate the update.
Thank you.
All right, thank you. All right, that concludes our discussion items. So on to future agenda items and our board meeting calendar. Following our regular committee or board meetings that we have currently scheduled, all scheduled to take place at the Education Service Center. On February 25, Policy Committee meeting, 4 p.m. March 3, a regular board meeting at 5:30 p.m. March 11, Curriculum Committee meeting, 4:30 p.m. And March 17, another regular board meeting at 5:30 p.m. Can we encourage the public to look to the official postings as the date or time or location might change? Any updates on the calendar that I might have missed? Thank you. Any items for follow-up and communication? All right. Hearing none, there is an item that that is appropriate to discuss in executive session, and this will require a roll call vote. I will move to adjourn into executive session pursuant to Wisconsin Statute 19.851C to consider employment, promotion, compensation, or performance evaluation data of any public employee over which the governmental body has jurisdiction or exercises responsibility, and take any such action if necessary based on its discussion, namely compensation, performance, and employment, and pursuant to Wisconsin Statute 19.851E to deliberate conducting public business whenever competitive or bargaining reasons require a closed session, and to review and approve the minutes of the executive session held on January 20th of 2025. That is my motion. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Mr. Jenkins. We have a motion and second to adjourn into executive session. Any final discussions? Hearing none, I have my roll call sheet, and I will call the roll. Mr. Jenkins?
Yes.
Ms. Aragot? Mr. Swiger votes yes. Mr. Donaldson? Yes. Dr. Temez? Yes. Ms. Kruger? Yes. And Ms. Lang?
Yes.
Thank you. That vote is unanimous, and we are adjourned into executive session. Thank you to everyone for attending and watching. Have a good evening.